Grameen Bank is best known for bringing the power of microfinance to over 4 million poor women in Bangladesh. But it has also created more than 24 other ventures.
Whether non-profit or for-profit, our involvement relates to benefiting to the poor people.
Muhammad Yunus, Grameen Bank's founder, describes why and how Grameen has launched enterprises in areas as diverse as textiles, cell phone technology, and healthcare. He shares the valuable lessons he has learned in finding new ways to give Grameen's members even greater access to opportunity and power.
We need a very different structure, different framework, different reference points. We would be judged by our own achievements.
Dr. Yunus sees a global need for a new kind of capitalism, one that puts people in need first. He demonstrates how economic viability can magnify the impact of social ventures. And he describes the support systems needed to allow this new model of capitalism to reach its vast potential.
Since capitalism is narrowly interpreted, socially conscious people don't want to get involved in business because that's uninteresting for them. That's not what we want. We don't want to make money. We want to do something else. So they are outside the business purview. I'm saying if you open it up, a lot of people will gradually come in, particularly young people who are looking for things to do in the world, contribute in the world, and solve problems of the world. They will dream of becoming a social business entrepreneurs, and the facilities has to be created so that they become social business entrepreneur. And I'm talking about even creating departments. There are business schools producing MBAs. There will be a social business program in the business school which will be creating social MBAs. And then you need another institution to make it happen, like you have the stock markets. And the existing stock market, people go there to make more money, as simple as that. You don't go there for charity. So if I want to do good to people in a business way, I have nowhere to go. So I said, why don't we create a completely separate stock exchange where all the companies who are doing good to people, the social business enterprises, will be listed. It could be women's empowerment, it could be street children, it could be drinking water, it could be arsenic problem in some place, it could be pollution problem in another place, it could be healthcare program in some place, it could be health insurance for poor people, whatever. There's 101 and 1,001 ideas that you can bring and run those things in a business way, provided the investors who would like. I cannot run a company like that, but I would like to invest in one. I have the money and I can spend it. If we have to run a social business enterprise right now, we run into a lot of problems because we have not set up supportive institutions alongside. So we would be depending a lot more on the old institutions, and they will be at each stage questioning our norms, or they will not understand our performance yardsticks and so on. If you are not making profit, why should I come and support you? Why should I lend money to you? You are not making any profit. How are you going to pay us back? But doesn't mean that you have to be out of the market completely. It means that you are the first one to venture into new territory and you lead the way and others will follow you and create institutions. This is how the pioneers always did. Be the first one, stick the neck out and make it happen. Luckily, already if you look around the world, there are many, more than we can think, are social business entrepreneurs. So there'll be initial problems, but if it sticks, if it grows, you can create your own world.
Muhammad Yunus created Grameen Bank, a bank tailored for poor people in response to crushing poverty in his newly created country of Bangladesh.
Poverty is not caused by the poor people. Poverty is caused by the system we built. Poverty is caused by the policies that we pursue.
Grameen Bank has made a significant contribution to reducing poverty in Bangladesh. Since Grameen's creation in the 1970s, life expectancy has risen more than 20 years. The fertility rate has been cut in half. It is estimated that each year, 200,000 Grameen members and their families escape poverty.
The question is, where do we end up? 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now? We did something wrong and the poverty is created. So let's do something right so that poverty disappears.
Dr. Yunus traces the growth of microfinance into a worldwide movement. He shares his vision for using it to meet the Millennium Development Goals and to create a poverty-free world. He describes what it will take from all of us to enable microfinance to reach its global potential.
To me, poor people are like a bonsai, like the bonsai tree, little tree. You pick the seed of the tallest tree in the forest and then take the best seed out of that and plant it in a flower pot. You got a tiny little tree and call it a bonsai. Nothing wrong with the seed. We got the best seed possible. Nothing wrong with the tree because we picked the tallest tree in the forest. But actually it grows this far. Why? Because we put them into a flower pot, the base. Society is the base. And society is so stingy, it doesn't give them the poor people space to grow. So I said, change the base. If you change the base, anybody will be as tall as anybody else. My belief is poverty is not caused by the poor people. Poverty is caused by the system we built. Poverty is caused by the policies that we pursue. So if this is my conclusion, I have to prove that this is true. So I built Grameen Bank as an institution, a bank, but a different kind of bank. You say, there are banks. Why did you create another one? I said, this kind of bank doesn't exist. That bank created poverty. These banks get them out of poverty. We assume that some people will always remain poor. I'm always asked in Bangladesh, you talk about having a poverty-free world. Are you crazy? Even the richest country in the world, United States, they have poor people there. I said, look, no matter how rich you get in the present system, you'll have poor people. So I'm trying to change that system. And that system, there will be no poor people because people are as capable as anybody else.
Bill Drayton is the founder of Ashoka, Innovators for the Public. Ashoka works at the forefront of the rapidly growing field of social entrepreneurship. It supports the work of entrepreneurs worldwide who solve social problems in far-reaching, pattern-changing ways.
Our job is not to give people fish. It's not to teach them how to fish. It's to build a new and better fishing industry.
From modest beginnings in the early 1980s, Ashoka has grown into a community of over 1,500 fellows, supported by staff members, partners, and volunteers in over 50 countries.
88% of the people we elect at the end of 5 years have had other institutions copy their ideas. 59% have achieved national policy impact, and on average, they're serving 174,000 people.
Bill Drayton has been a social entrepreneur all his life. He shares his story to provide insights into what it takes to create widespread social change.
The development of Ashoka is very typical of the development of any major entrepreneurial venture. The idea, of course, dates back at least to the time I was an undergraduate. There was the challenge that came very sharp once I'd been in India. You must close this north-south gap. You must speed up development, democracy in the world. So there are many things that were very clear, but something was missing, and that was that the historical moment wasn't ripe, and also in our personal lives it wasn't ripe. We needed to go through our apprenticeship. I had to spend time at McKinsey learning how the world works, learning the key skills of how you cause change. Then, as I was at EPA, we sensed that the historical moment was coming. You could hear the hinge creaking. And what we were seeing very personally was that our friends, my friends in India and elsewhere, were starting to be social entrepreneurs. And what was happening was that the post-independence generation in Asia was coming of professional age. They were now in their 30s. Their parents thought getting control of the government, take over those instruments, that was the focus. The next generation grew in an environment with these overpowering government institutions, and some of them felt they could do better. And so you could see the beginning of a very significant wave of social entrepreneurs who were having a very difficult time. No word to describe the field, no support institutions, a lot of doubt ranging from their family to the government. I said, oh, this looks like this is the time. Then we asked, all right, well, how do we intervene? Where can you intervene which will have the biggest possible impact with very modest resources, all we could imagine available to us at the time? And that is the moment when a person and an idea have finished their apprenticeship, and they know, the entrepreneur knows that they have an idea that is the next big generic step for their field. Then all you want to do is go full-time and run with this idea, seize the historical moment. But who are you? What is this idea? It doesn't fit any of the existing patterns because they were set up to serve the old idea. At that point, a little bit makes all the difference. Very little money, so you can look your family in the eye and say, I know it's crazy to leave my tenured job in a nice, safe institution. You've got to be able to look them in the eye and say, I'm going to do this. And we give you the financial ability to do that if you need it. But beyond that, you now are a part of a family of your peers, and your uncle can see that people that are very respected in your society and internationally think your work is important, believe in you. The early years of Ashoka, as for almost all our fellows, raising money was a nightmare. No funding from any institutional foundation for our first 6 years. Basically, the Klingenstein, Lipkin, and Golden families, that was it. And I was working part-time at McKinsey, commuting to New York. Ashoka was going, and it was a very crazy time. And that overload is what made the MacArthur sudden phone call in November of 1984, miraculous. The MacArthur Foundation had chosen me to be one of its fellows, which gave me 5 years income. And also, very importantly, for people who could not understand what Ashoka was about, gave me a sort of vaguely reputable category to fit into. It was a very key, liberating moment. I was able to go on leave from McKinsey, which I'm still technically on leave.
Peter Eigen is the creator of Transparency International. Transparency International has focused worldwide attention on the issue of corruption and leads a global effort to combat it.
These big projects lend themselves to huge kickbacks, to payments of $10, $20, $30 million for individuals on their bank accounts, say in Liechtenstein and Switzerland.
In just a little over a decade, Transparency International has become a formidable force for change, with more than 90 national chapters. It has galvanized the public, private, and social sectors into adopting concrete steps to rid the world of the blight of corruption.
So that was the breakthrough. I believe that this should be an approach which typically social entrepreneurs should pursue.
Throughout a notable career with the World Bank, with Transparency International, Dr. Eigen has always been entrepreneurial in his approach to solving problems. In this program, he shares his experiences and strategies in creating global change.
In our preparation of the launch conference of Transparency International, we had developed a number of insights which are still the guiding principles today. First of all, we knew that we could not investigate individual cases to expose them, as Amnesty International is doing in their area, because we wanted to bring people to join us who were even involved in corruption, because corruption is so complex and it is so technical in many ways that you needed the people who really know what they are talking about to join you and work together on joint programs. So that was probably the most important shift from what I had personally had in mind when I left Kenya. The second insight was that we would have to deal with corruption with the local knowledge and the local enthusiasm and the local courage and credibility which has to come from each society itself. So we knew very quickly that we wouldn't be able to operate like the Catholic Church, or like the World Bank, sort of preaching from the center what everybody else had to do. And therefore we began very early on to initiate the creation of what we call national chapters, which are non-governmental organizations organized in various countries under their own systems, under their own conditions. And the third important insight was that very often when you deal with corruption, people focus mainly on punishing. But in our opinion, criminal law is a relatively blunt weapon against corruption. We have a rather holistic approach. We see at all the different elements of an integrity system which have to be in place in order to protect society against corruption. This includes legal matters, laws, institutions, guidelines. It includes the role of the media, their independence, their competence to deal with corruption. It includes very technical matters like how you select, for instance, contractors, under international competitive bidding or so, how much transparency you enforce in your legislative body. It includes matters like how you deal with conflict of interest in a society, and so on. So it is like a mosaic of many different elements which together create the overall system of integrity. And these were things which we learned very early on in our brainstorming sessions leading up to the launch of our organization.
In the early 1970s, the newly independent country of Bangladesh was reeling under the effects of war, flood, and famine. Fazl Hassan Abid organized a relief effort that was quickly transformed into something very different.
We came to the conclusion that relief and rehabilitation is not going to be enough. It has to be a long-term commitment to development. People were poor and going to remain poor unless we bring about change.
Abid understood that one does not simply develop people. People must develop themselves. Through the Bangladesh Rural Advancement Committee, now simply known as BRAC, he has enabled millions of people to break away from poverty.
Poor people are poor because they are powerless. You must organize people for power. They must organize themselves in such a way that they can change their lives.
In this program, Abid shares his story and that of BRAC as it has grown from a small group of dedicated staff members to a giant non-government organization of over 4 million members, which continues to be a guiding light for all who take on the task of global development.
At that time, there was a Brazilian educator named Paulo Freire, whose book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, was published in 1973. And I think early in 73, I read that book. his thesis was that the poor people are poor because they are powerless. You must organize people for power. They must organize themselves in such a way. They must understand the dynamics of their communities in such a way that they can change their lives. So that book sort of provided a theoretical for us to try and develop people for power. So we set up a whole 100 lessons in which we sort of started building self-worth in people. And through that process, you build self-confidence that they can change their condition and they don't have to live in poverty and degradation forever. We go into a village, a field worker, we call him a program organizer. He goes into a village and organizes maybe half a dozen people, maybe 15 or 16 people, and say that you form a group and then you bring in more people till you are about 30 to 40, and then a village group is in existence. And then once we have got this 40 people in a village organization, we call them, then we start other programs like saving starts even before the group is complete. But once the group is complete, then of course we'll provide credit. We'll also provide some training programs like legal education so that they understand their rights and obligations. In each village we have 1, 2 or 3 groups of 40 women. So about 10 groups to 1 PO. In an average area office, I think we have got about 20 POs. The 20 POs will look after about 200 groups. 200 multiplied by 40, it could be as many as about 8,000. So area office will cover about 7,000 to 8,000 group members. So you replicate throughout the country and you have 4.5 million.